I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger, let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah, the man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things, promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop, give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire, I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. Coming to you on Thursday, a little bit early. Getting ready to preview the championship weekend games, talk some of the latest news, and all the goings on in the NFL. Dennis, how has your week been?
Well, my week's been pretty good, though. At least today, it was nice because I wasn't the only one that had to leave the house and go attend to their duties at work or school, as it has been the rest of the week. So everybody else had to get out and go to work or school, and I felt like, now I was part of the family again. No, temperatures are trending up. It hit like 14 or 20, something like that today. It's supposed to be in the 30s this weekend before it gets cold again. We got a little snow coming down right now. We'll see. I didn't look to see how bad it was going to get yet, but it's Ohio. We get winter. It's something that happens.
Hopefully they get at least one day of practice in this week.
Who's that?
Your son's.
Oh, they're practicing tonight. So his basketball team. That's why we're going early. I know you got something going on tomorrow, but they moved. They found a different location to hold practice because usually they practice on Tuesdays. His team had a good game. They won something like, I think, 24-14 or something last week. So they're a contested 1-1 after that first game. He's playing well. He felt a little bit off this morning. He had a little bit of an earache. It looks like the big fella might have to get some ear tubes.
What a fun time.
Yeah.
Well, before we dive into game previews and then our dynasty stuff, there is some actual coaching news. We said it was looking likely that Aaron Glenn was going to go to the Jets when we were together on Tuesday. They made that official on Wednesday. Dennis, they still don't have a GM, but what do you think of the hire?
Well, you know what they still got, though? They still got Nathaniel Hackett.
I thought he got fired.
I'm looking at their staffing right now, and it's still showing him. So
maybe he just got replaced.
If he hasn't been yet, he should be on his way. I hope Aaron Glenn is smart enough to know that, like, hey, I'm getting this job, but that ain't my dude there. I think, Glenn is a former Jet. He obviously wanted to be there. He's got an affinity for the team as a former player there. They've got some weapons. They've got a very good defense. I think he's going in. While the defense wasn't as good this year as it's been the last couple, I think he's going in there with the expectation that I can build around this defense and we can get the offense figured out. Whether they go build from the inside out by grabbing a couple more offensive linemen, Tyron Smith. I think we got to say that that bird has flown. He struggling staying healthy is as good as he was. I just think it's gone. Maybe they'll get work on that. They've got issues at quarterback. they're going to need to work that out. So he's got his work cut out for him, and getting an offensive coordinator that's not Nathaniel Hackett, I think, would be at the top of my list. Todd Downing was their passing game coordinator. Sean Jefferson, their wide receivers coach. Looking down, none of their other offensive coaches really strike me as, offensive coordinator material, mostly because I just haven't heard of any of them. So he's probably going to be building that staff from the bottom up. Their defensive coordinator position's vacant, so he's got some work to do putting together his coaching staff and while preparing for the draft. Who's their GM now?
They don't have one. That's what I was.
Oh, Phil Savage is working on as the interim. It's going to be funny when Phil Savage pulls the Greg Popovich and goes, I just can't find anybody that I think would be as good as me.
Yeah, I did look it up. Todd Downing took over the play calling duties, but you're right, they retained Nathaniel Hackett because he had a good relationship with Jeff Ulbricht. I believe Ulbricht was their defensive coordinator, and he moved on.
That's right. Didn't he go to Atlanta?
Yeah, I think so. The next story has been a fascinating saga. So on Wednesday, Liam Cohen announced he was withdrawing from head coaching opportunities and was going to stay with the Bucs on a contract that make him one of the highest paid coordinators in the NFL. In what feels like a very much a corresponding move, the Jaguars decided to turn about face and fire Trent Baalke after deciding that they were going to keep him when they fired head coach Doug Peterson. And then magically today, now Cohen and the Jaguars are talking again. What do you make of this situation?
Yeah, it's your classic, but wait, there's more money we can talk about to get you to come here. I think Liam Cohen did a great job. He leveraged the interest to his benefit in Tampa. He had his stint at where was it? Kentucky. He had a good head coaching stint there. I think he's proven that now that he gets offenses. The question of we've seen lots of great coordinators become head coaches and fail at it. I don't think that'll be the case with Cohen. I think his offense will be good enough that, given the patience to build the team and getting rid of Baalke, if he decides to actually leave Tampa and go up there to Jacksonville, I think that's a good move for Jacksonville. But now they're in the general manager business, and I don't think Liam Cohen he doesn't have the cachet to dictate who that GM is. And so we could end up with, one of these marriages like we've seen in Tennessee, where they got a GM who now they got another coach that's stuck with, and every other year they're firing the head coach or the GM in Tennessee, it seems. And, we don't want to end up with that in your first time as a head coach. Jacksonville has some weapons that I think would flourish under Liam Cohen. Brian Thomas, Bigsby and Travis Etienne. Trevor Lawrence could use some stability. I know that there's a lot of fantasy analysts are down on Trevor Lawrence because he just hasn't lived up to his billing. But he also, there's been a lot of things go wrong during his tenure. So let's see. I hope for Trevor that Liam Cohen goes there. I hope for Baker and Mike Evans that he doesn't.
Yeah, and so you mentioned Cohen. He was wide receiver and quarterback coach for a couple of years for the Rams. Then in 2021, went to Kentucky as the offensive coordinator. Went to the Rams in 22 as offensive coordinator, and then went back to Kentucky as offensive coordinator in 23 before coming to Tampa Bay. So only a couple of years, even actually at the coordinator level in the NFL, and was very good offense. You know, the Buccaneers were third in yards, fourth in points this year, but the Rams in 22 were 32nd in yards, 27th in points. So I know Stafford got injured that year, but it was it's been a mixed bag. So I wouldn't say it's a lead pipe lock, but we will see. He was definitely a hot name out there.
So let's talk about Jacksonville, though, since they fired their GM, or a head coach, obviously. Of this coaching staff, you've got Press Taylor, offensive coordinator, Mike McCoy, Andrew Briner, no running backs coach, Chad Hall at wide receivers. Any of those guys you think that if Cohen went in, he should look at keeping?
I don't think they'll keep anyone, no. But we'll have to see. Kind of an interesting mess there. And you know what? The Jaguars have one good receiver. The jury's still out on Trevor Lawrence, honestly, and the jury's definitely still out on both their running backs. Christian Kirk had a couple of good years. Maybe he's an okay receiver. Evan Ingram really flourished in Doug Peterson's system, but we have a lot of years in New York where he didn't exactly flourish and couldn't stay on the field, and that not being able to stay on the field reared its ugly head last year. Maybe Brenton Strange develops into something. You know my personal feelings on Gabe Davis. I don't think, this is not a 1-for-1 for what he's got in Tampa Bay. It's incredibly possible, despite popular opinion, that Baker Mayfield is a better quarterback than Trevor Lawrence will ever be.
I wouldn't wholeheartedly disagree with that.
A couple other coaching things. Al Golden leaving the Notre Dame Fighting Irish to become the defensive coordinator in Cincinnati for the Bengals. And it looks like the Cowboys are circling their own offensive coordinator, Brian Schottenheimer, to be their new head coach. And that deal not completed or necessarily final. What do you think of those rumors out there?
I like the Golden move. He had the Notre Dame defense playing very well. He's had a lot of stops in college and the NFL, both sides of the ball. He's coached linebackers in Detroit and Cincinnati. He was a defensive coordinator at Virginia, head coach at Temple and the Miami of Florida. So he's been around. He's an experienced coach. He's going in. They've got, the only opening they still have is at the linebackers coach position. They're probably not going to change many more coaches because that's just not what Cincinnati does when you're under contract. So these are the guys that Golden's going to have to work with. I like that move. I think that'll be good for the Cincinnati defense. Now, I think they need to back that up, though, with free agent money and draft pick capital spent on defensive players. The defense, it's wild that their defense was so bad, and Trey Hendrickson led the league in sacks. That's how bad that defense is. As far as Brian Schottenheimer, he's not Sean McVay he's been around a long time, it seems, and maybe some of it is like, oh, well, it's because of his dad. That's why it seems so long. He started out as an assistant with the Rams in 97. He was with Kansas City, then went and spent some time in college at Syracuse and USC. Since then, he's just kind of been steadily moving up the ranks and being quarterback coach, offensive coordinator. He's been with the Chargers, the Jets, Washington, the Rams, Indianapolis, Seattle. But it isn't like he goes somewhere and he's so good that they're like, man, we got to keep this guy. And it's 2 or 3 years here, 2 or 3 years there. And then apparently his offense is so good that they fire the head coach and he's out of a job. We'll see, man. He's been in Dallas since 2022, so Jerry knows him. Jerry's comfortable with him. It feels like of the last three spots that are open, it kind of feels like McCarthy's going to New Orleans, Schottenheimer's getting Dallas, and I don't have any idea what's going on in Las Vegas. But
yeah, and it'll be interesting because I think a lot of the offense for Dallas the last 2 years definitely gets credited to Mike McCarthy, who decided to move on from Kellen Moore. And I think it's interesting. Moore seemed like a guy that was a potential finalist in Dallas too. Is it coming down to Jerry's tired of waiting, and the Eagles are going too far in the playoffs for Joe Brady or Kellen Moore to land in this cycle? Or these teams this impatient? It's kind of interesting. Brian Schottenheimer has worked, as an offensive coordinator under Eric Mangini, under Rex Ryan, under Jeff Fisher and Pete Carroll and Mike McCarthy. I don't know that any of those names lights your heart on fire. And I feel like Pete Carroll was probably the most successful of those head coaches. And most of the time he was there from 18 to 20, I felt like the offense was much maligned. So,
right.
We'll have to see.
I mean, it just feels like the second coming of Jason Garrett. We're in for vanilla. It's it's
not great. Not great, Bob. Not great. Well, let's move on to the games that are going to be played this weekend. The first up is the NFC Championship game, which takes place at 3 Eastern on Sunday. The Washington Commanders, the number 6 seed, at the Philadelphia Eagles, who were the number 2 seed. These two teams in the same division are very familiar with one another. Their first meeting was a Thursday night matchup. It was a 26-18 victory for the Philadelphia Eagles at home. They did that basically on the strength of a giant fourth quarter, because this was a 10-6 game going into the fourth quarter where Saquon Barkley really exploded, had a couple of touchdowns, and helped put the game away. On the flip side, the two teams met in week 16, and that was the game that was kind of remarkable for Philly taking a huge early lead, but having Jalen Hurts get knocked out with a concussion. Kenny Pickett later got banged up and sort of knocked out with some broken ribs. Tanner McKee did not appear in this game. It must have been the next game that McKee appeared that we were thinking of, where he threw a touchdown. Because the only two guys that threw the ball were Hurts and Pickett in this one. But Jaden Daniels came back, and it was Washington that exploded for 22 points in the fourth quarter to get a 36-33 victory. Dennis, these two teams know each other pretty well. To me, it feels like it comes down to whether the Eagles can bottle up Jaden Daniels and whether the Commanders can stop Saquon Barkley. But how do you see this game going?
Yeah, Jaden Daniels has shown that he's kind of wise beyond his years. He's played really, really well. He doesn't seem to get phased. He's going to be under pressure. Philadelphia has got a good defense there. Let's see. Philadelphia has the number 1 ranked pass defense and the number 10 ranked rushing defense. It feels like it's going to be on the shoulders of Jaden Daniels. Brian Robinson, Chris Rodriguez, Jeremy McNichols, Austin Eckler, none of those backs at this stage of their career seem special. It doesn't feel like they're going to put up numbers. Even in that come from behind victory, Brian Robinson led him in carries with 10, but he only had 24 yards. Eckler missed the game, but Rodriguez was 3 for 5 and McNichols 2 for 3. Jaden Daniels rushed it 9 times for 81 yards to go along with that 258 yards passing and 5 touchdowns. So, I think it was last week I said that the Bills were going to go as far as Josh Allen's broad shoulders were going to carry him. Well, the Commanders feel like they're going as far as Jaden Daniels' skinny ass is going to carry him. Washington averages 154 yards a game rushing versus in the two games versus Philadelphia, they averaged 103 yards. So they weren't making hay on the ground. In the first game, they weren't able to overcome it with the passing. The second game, Hurts got injured, and even though they still scored 33 points and Barkley put up 150 yards, Washington, if they're in it, if they're close at the end, they have a puncher's chance. Washington's got a decent run defense, but they can't stop Saquon Barkley. I think their run defense, honestly, they're ranked third, but I think they're ranked third because their pass defense is ranked 30th. So it's like, well, why are we going to spend a lot of time trying to run on this team when we can just pass? Saquon Barkley rushed for 296 yards in the two regular season games. I don't know if they could set the over-under high enough on Saquon Barkley yards for me to bet the under. It just feels like they're going to feed him and feed him. They're going to eat that clock. They're going to grind it out. They're going to let Saquon Barkley run. It feels like another 150-yard game out of Barkley, which is going to put pressure on Daniels to complete passes. Trying to find my numbers here. So, yeah, even in that Week 16 game where Daniels had the 5 touchdowns, Philadelphia still had 36 minutes time of possession to Washington's 24. So they still dominated the time of possession. It feels like we're in for another one of those games. And if Washington, they just got to stay close enough to have the ball last is what they're hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, you said they haven't been able to stop Saquon. Nobody's been able to stop Saquon. I mean, the Rams held him to 50 yards fewer than when they met in the regular season and still gave up 205 yards. I mean, he's just, to me, he is the NFL MVP. I know it's going to go to one of those glory boy quarterbacks. And, as much as I love Josh Allen, appreciate what Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow did, Saquon Barkley, if you're talking about most valuable to your team and your team's success, that is the change in Philadelphia this year. And I think it's going to come down, the game that they won at home, he basically took over in the fourth quarter and scored 2 huge touchdowns, had a couple of huge receptions, and was able to salt it away. And in the game that they lost, he wasn't able to get enough touches and presence with Kenny Pickett, in the way they swamped Kenny Pickett, and he wasn't able to outthrow them, and Jaden Daniels had it close enough that he was able to make some magic. I think the Eagles are going to win at home. That is who I am picking to go from the NFC.
I'm taking the Eagles as well.
Next up, the AFC Championship. This is the top 2 seeds in the AFC. Kansas City Chiefs hosting the Buffalo Bills. These two teams know each other very well. They did meet in the regular season. The Bills were the only team to hand Kansas City a regular season loss when the Chiefs played all of their players, including Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. I know the Broncos beat them, but nobody of consequence was on the field. That game was a little bit earlier in the season. Isaiah Pacheco had not yet returned, but they did already have DeAndre Hopkins and Xavier Worthy who played in that game. Marquise Brown and Isaiah Pacheco will kind of join the battle here. But the question has never been Buffalo against Kansas City in the regular season. They fared very well in the regular season, but Josh Allen is 0-3 against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, including some shocking and heartbreaking losses. What do you think they have to do to turn it around in this year's AFC Championship game?
So it feels like, as much as we want to keep giving accolades to Patrick Mahomes, I think the story in Kansas City this year is that defense. They put 8 sacks or 9 sacks on CJ Stroud last week. And right now, they've got the 14th, or let's see, Kansas City has the 18th ranked pass defense and the 8th ranked run defense. And Buffalo is ranked 9th in both of those. Buffalo is Josh Allen. Like they have other players. James Cook is nice. He scored 13 touchdowns this year. I don't think he broke 1,000 yards like last year, but he did have he just ratcheted up his touchdowns to no end.
He had 1,009 yards.
Did he? I knew it was close. But Khalil Shakir has stepped up as their number one receiving option.
He had more touchdowns than you realize. He had 16 on the ground, 2 receiving, 18 total.
Yeah, it was a big ass number.
Yes.
But that receiving crew in Buffalo is just kind of inconsistent. And they have a lot of weeks where somebody steps up. We've seen a week where Curtis Samuel stepped up and had a good week. Mac Hollins has had a good week. Even Amari Cooper had a good week. Like I think the second week he was there or something. But mostly it's Khalil Shakir. Dalton Kincaid has been a disappointment, especially for where we had him going in fantasy. So Josh Allen really has to be the key. In the first game against Kansas City when the Bills won, Allen led the team in rushes and yards. James Cook did best him in rushing touchdowns, 2-1, but Cook only carried the ball 9 times for 20 yards and he caught 5 of 6 passes, which is good for a whole 7 yards. I mean, I got to be honest. I think I could get 7 yards on 5 of 6.
Well, I mean, you brought up the defense. I think that was a key in that regular season game. They won the turnover battle 2-1, and Josh Allen was not sacked any times. I mentioned who Kansas City was missing. I forgot Buffalo was missing Dalton Kincaid and Keon Coleman in that game. Missing though, as you said, it doesn't feel like, it's not like when the Lions are missing Amon-Ra St. Brown, you're like, they are down a huge passing game weapon. When the Cowboys don't have CeeDee Lamb, that's a problem. It's really, I think I'd be most nervous if Buffalo was missing Khalil Shakir.
Right. And even then it's like, well, let's go to Curtis Samuel. He's, what's the real drop off?
Which is what they did in this game.
Yep. I think it's a fairly well matched game. I think they're the top 2. Them and Baltimore are the clear top 3 in the league, and I think in any given game or any given season, you can shuffle them around. Kansas City does enough to win. They're not a team that looks to put up. They're not a guarantee for 35 points every week. But then Hollywood Brown come back, and he has started to light it up as a passing threat. Their run game is horrendous. Neither Hunt nor Pacheco are very efficient. They both do. They're almost the same person when it comes to running. Hunt's a little bit slower. Pacheco's a little bit less of a receiver. They're honestly there. You're probably looking for a combined 18 touches between the two of them, 18 to 20 total touches, and they're probably going to get you 65 yards. One of them may fall into the end zone a couple times, but the offense really runs through Kelsey and now Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy. I do think the speed of Worthy and Hollywood Brown are going to present some problems for Buffalo. Mahomes doesn't have that. I'm not going to say toughness because I think he's tough, but he's not 6'5" and 245 pounds like Josh Allen. He's he's 6'3", 6'2", 225. So it's not like he's not Bryce Young, but Allen just feels like he's built different. But with Xavier Worthy's ability to take the top off and Hollywood Brown's speed as well, I think that opens up a lot more for Travis Kelce. And the team is just they played the regular season to win the playoffs. Well, yeah, they were great. They're like, yeah, well, if we can get the number 1 seed, we definitely want it. But it felt like they just were let's make sure, let's go out each week. We're going to execute our game plan. I my Lions got knocked out, and I said numerous times on the show, the Lions defense wasn't good enough to win it or get them there unless every single thing went exactly perfectly right. And I didn't have any real hope that was going to happen, but I wasn't going to pick against them. The Lions being out, I'm cheering for history. I'm picking the Chiefs.
I am going to take the Buffalo Bills. I just looked up the weather. It's supposed to be 34, partly cloudy on Sunday in Kansas City, so shouldn't be too big of a factor. Both teams have played in much, much worse. But I'm taking the Bills and Josh Allen. I've been pulling for them for a long time. They're probably, of the 4 teams left, the only team I actually genuinely like. I think Bills Eagles be a fun game. But no matter who wins in the NFC, if Kansas City goes through, that's who I'm pulling for. Never Kansas City, never
Right.
history for me. Well, before we get out of here, we want to talk, continue our kind of look at off season and what we might expect. Look at some veteran players who might be traded from the teams they're on right now this off season. So, Dennis, why don't you kick it off first? Who's your first one up?
So, I know we were going to do 5, and I actually did 5, and you had your players on the list, and I don't know how I missed Will Levis.
Well, we can talk about Will together then.
Yeah, I how about you? Since you had him on your list first, you go first.
Well, that was actually one that I started thinking about and switched to. I think Tennessee having the number 1 overall pick. We saw at the end of the season when Will Levis got benched for Mason Rudolph. I don't think the current coaching staff sees him as the future or the answer, and they kept the current coaching staff. Having the number 1 overall pick, I think if they don't take a quarterback, they're certainly going for somebody in the off season. I think that really means that Will Levis ends up being this year's Sam Howell, a guy who was taken, who some people still think has some potential, who started a lot of games but didn't have a lot of great success, and whose coaching staff kind of decided to turn the page. And to me, hopefully for him, he finds some place that he can end up being like a solid backup or in competition with another journeyman veteran in the starting mix, where maybe he can rehab himself and maybe can get back to, the promise some people thought he had when he went at the top of the second round. But I think his time in Tennessee is done. And we've seen them as a team, they just did it with Malik Willis when they decided he wasn't the guy. And he actually went to a spot where it seems like it has benefited him. And maybe he is playing, it more into the upside of the talent people thought he had when he was drafted. So that could be, if you're still holding Levis, that could be your best case scenario, I think.
Yeah, when I started, my initial thing was like, well, is Tennessee with the number 1 pick? Are they gonna take a quarterback? Because I think by and large, the consensus is that neither quarterback at the top of the draft is really worthy of being picked that high. But you either have a quarterback or you don't, and you don't very often get the number 1 pick to be able to choose. So it feels like Tennessee's going to take a quarterback. And if they do, it makes sense to move on from Levis. They've got a second-year coach who wants to get his guy. They got a brand new GM this year. Levis still has 2 years left on his rookie deal. So if I'm the acquiring team, I've got some time before I have to make a real decision, and he's not super expensive to my salary cap. So if I'm looking for a young quarterback that, might be able to pop off with a little more training, and coaches, they all think, well, I can fix him. And who knows? Who is it that's going virtual reality this offseason?
Anthony Richardson.
Yeah. So, and Jaden Daniels has talked a lot about the work he does with virtual reality. And the guy that helped Josh Allen is who Richardson's working with. If Richardson comes out next year and he's like playing significantly better, whoever ends up with Levis is going to be like, well, let's get this guy, because Levis's biggest issue is processing and accuracy. Well, if they can get that, there are some teams that need quarterbacks that aren't going to be in a position to get Cam Ward or Shadir Sanders. The Jets could use a young guy. They've got Tyrod Taylor and somebody else and Rodgers.
Jordan Travis.
And as well as he played before he broke his leg, I don't think he was really considered a significantly high prospect for the NFL. The Giants need somebody. They've got Drew Lock, and
they actually have 0 quarterbacks on the roster.
All right.
They're all free agents.
So it would make sense for the Giants to maybe bring him in, pair him with a veteran that, we've seen Dayball, he had success with Josh Allen, and maybe that works. The Rams, what's going on behind Matthew Stafford? Can they get somebody? Those were, when I looked at these, I kind of looked at like, well, if they're getting traded, where are they going? It's easy to say, oh, get rid of him, but somebody's got to want him or need him.
Well, I think with quarterbacks, and I actually think that a lot of these, are positions of need, especially with quarterback. We're going to see a lot of movement, and there are a lot of teams that have a lot of questions. And like you said, not a great quarterback draft. Last year, you had all these teams that were like, I don't want to go splash out for a veteran, or I'm fine with one of these guys if they price themselves out. I'm not going to make a big move to sign somebody because there was a big pool to draft from. Doesn't feel like there's a big pool. There's Sanders and Ward kind of being talked about at the top. People I feel like are trying to talk themselves into Jalen Milroe and Quinn Ewers. But, I think this is not an incredible draft, and there are a lot more holes to fill. Like if you look at every team, especially since what we've talked about too, is you need a backup that can go out there and play. Like Miami's another perfect example of a team. Maybe they are going to roll the Tua as their starter. He's not a lock to play 17 games. They need somebody who they think can go out there and can play and can give them, competitive. They have not had those backups. I think we've seen backups have become a precious commodity. And that's, you talk about the low cost option. That's what ended up happening for Sam Howell. He went to Washington, becomes a place where you can maybe learn and grow. He didn't look exceptional in the small sample that he just got foisted into one game, but you don't know if that doesn't turn out to be a situation where they have a chance to grow and rehab and do some other things. Who is your second player?
So my second guy is one of my favorite players when he came out that I really felt bad going into his second year because he basically they drafted him and they're like, yeah, man, thanks for the 1,000-yard season. Oh, hey, here's Bijan Robinson. It felt like Bobcat Goldthwait. Hey, I lost my job. Well, I didn't really lose my job. Just when I got there, somebody else was doing it. And that's what happened to Tyler Algier. Now, they've kept him involved, and he's been productive as the backup to Bijan Robinson, but he's clearly not as talented as Bijan. He's going into the last year of his rookie deal. And I think if I'm Atlanta, I don't know that I'm looking to re-sign him. I've got Bijan Robinson. I can bring in somebody that's cheaper, whether it's a rookie, whether it's, a different free agent. I think he's got value to a team that needs to bring in a bigger back. He's a competent pass receiver, good blocking. He could be a 3-down back. He's just not one of these elite trait kind of guys. He's like a notch below James Conner, and he's about that big. Could he turn into James Conner given the right volume? Maybe. He's got a good shot. He's 225 pounds. I think if he had ran in the 4.4s when he was coming out, he'd have been much more regarded because he kept talking about him going to run a 4.3, and then he put up what, I think a 4.62 or something. So that's you got to face reality here, Holmes. But I like him because he can do everything pretty good. He's a good runner. He sees the field well. He follows his blocks. He knows. And if he gets to the second level, he can outrun some people. But he's also powerful. He's going to get you short yardage. He's going to protect the quarterback. He's going to you put him out. He's more than just a check down back in the passing game as well. And somebody like Chicago, as high as I was on Roschon Johnson when he come out, he's not a power back. He's a big back, but he's a finesse back. Ben Johnson going there. He's been through Detroit where they had Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift and Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Bring in Tyler Algier and pair him with DeAndre Swift again. Now you've got that thunder and lightning combo again. Las Vegas, they need a running.
They have nothing.
He could literally go into Las Vegas and become James Conner. Like, he could carry the ball 260 times, catch 40 passes, and just be that dude. He could, for the next 2 to 3 years, he could be the guy you don't really have to worry about while you're building that team. Pittsburgh, Najee and Warren are both free agents. We know that Arthur Smith likes a big back. We know Arthur Smith likes Tyler Algier because he drafted him. Seems to make a nice fit there.
Yeah, especially since it doesn't look like he's leaving, much to the dismay of some Pittsburgh Steelers fans.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, your theory with why you went with Algier is why I went with one of my guys, which I'll get to in a minute. First, I will just say my second guy was Kirk Cousins, and it's for two pretty obvious reasons. A, I don't believe for a second they're keeping him as their backup quarterback. That will create a weird, toxic situation. If Michael Penix is your guy, Michael Penix has to be your guy. You definitely want a veteran backup, but the guy that you signed to a huge money deal who was the starter is not the guy. And two, I just don't think Atlanta releases him and just eats that entire cap hit without getting something back. And there is going to be one of those teams, because of the need of quarterback and because of the shallowness of this draft class, somebody is going to pull the trigger to bring him in. If you look at Cousins' stats, they weren't horrendous, and he'll be 1 year more removed from that injury. He was never the most mobile guy, but maybe if he can get a little bit mobility and a little bit more power back this offseason. I mean, we went for 3,500 yards and 18 touchdowns. There were plenty of teams that didn't do that well. It was the turnovers, which he hadn't historically done, that really bit him in the ass. But my running back, I went kind of the same thought process as you, and I went with Rachaad White, a guy who is going into the last year of a rookie deal, who doesn't seem likely to get re-signed with his team, Tampa Bay, who we've seen be fairly productive when given opportunities. But this year he clearly got surpassed by Bucky Irving, not only as the better runner, but Irving actually was a big producer in the passing game. And we saw Sean Tucker, when asked to mix in, do really well, to the point where they were trying to figure out how they could do it with 3 backs, and it just didn't really work. So they went back to 2 backs. I think running back is another position. Like you mentioned, there are a lot of teams that have a lot of needs. Rachaad White has been an excellent pass catcher, probably even more so than a runner. And I think that would be a great compliment. Even other teams trying to find that right skill set, people keep trying to put Jaleel McLaughlin into that Alvin Kamara type role for Denver. I don't think he fits that because he is not a good pass blocker. The reason he kept ceding snaps to Javonte Williams, even though it was pretty clear Sean Payton did not care for Javonte Williams, is because McLaughlin can't block and he's not really a great power runner. I think this would be a better combination. I think that's another place where they're looking for thunder and lightning, and I don't think Denver has either right now.
Yeah. Next on my list is the venerable Debo Samuel. He's a very talented player, and he just disappears sometimes, and he gets game planned out. I think that his skill set is such that he could be like a really, really good receiver, but for whatever reason, they like to beat him up in the running game. He's got 1 year left on his deal, a $31 million dead cap. They're not going to cut him, but he seemed like the odd man out when everybody's healthy. If Ayuk and McCaffrey and Kittle are healthy, it seems like Debo's the 4. And then Jawan Jennings came on this year, and he had a breakout year. Ricky Pearsall, they drafted him in the first round. It's like, what are they doing? They've got all of this. It ended up being good because Ayuk got hurt and McCaffrey got hurt. But now McCaffrey's going to be back next year. And, we've seen it with McCaffrey in the past. Sometimes he needs a year or two off, and then he comes back and he balls out. I think McCaffrey, when he comes back, if he's healthy, I think they reduce his load some because we have seen like Jordan Mason and those backups, Isaac Guerrero, perform well. But it just feels like if I'm San Francisco, I want besides a comp pick out of Debo Samuel, which is what they'll get after this season if they just let him walk as a free agent. Send him off to New England. They need a receiver to be the top dog. Now, is Debo elite number 1? No. But he walks into New England, gives Drake May a weapon that he has not had since there, and he immediately becomes the best receiver on that team. I think he would play very well as a complement to Kayshon Boutte. Then you've got Polk, who provides some speed. I don't know if Kendrick Bourne is going to still be there. Hunter Henry, as steady as ever at the tight end. So we'll see what Vrabel does. But it seems like New England would be a nice fit for Debo Samuel.
Yeah, that's potential. My next guy is Tyreek Hill. And I think there's been a lot of buzz that a team like New England may go and acquire him. And I'll be honest, we saw him be clearly unhappy with where he was in Miami, sitting out the fourth quarter of the last game of the season, then posting on social media a pretty clear indication that he was done. Now, we have not heard from him since then. What we have heard is that he had a meeting with the GM and the coach in Miami, who then came out and said he's perfectly happy and we're all on the same page. I don't believe that. And I think that they are going to end up moving him. I think there is some kind of a toxic situation. I think, we've seen a couple of these wide receivers where after a couple of years of good production someplace, they kind of wear out their welcome and they need a change of scenery. I think he's still got a lot of talent. He's only one season removed from going for almost 2,000 receiving yards. But I think he is definitely somebody that, for the good of their organization and everything, they are going to find a way to move him this offseason.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, they've got Jalen Waddle. Jonnu Smith came in, has performed well. They've got a monster set of running backs with.
Could you see a situation where Miami moves Tyreek Hill and then goes and gets Debo Samuel because Samuel is familiar with Mike McDaniel and his offense and can do some of those gadget things that he likes to do?
Maybe, but they also have Devon Achane that can do those gadget things. And I think really it comes down to there's just not enough balls in Miami. It's like San Francisco. Somebody's got to be the odd man out. And it's historically been Jalen Waddle. but Jalen Waddle also isn't causing problems. Tyreek Hill's getting pulled over and arrested, and it's just a distraction. And he's older. He's what, 4 years, 5 years older than Waddle. So to me, I agree with you. It makes sense to move on from him. I think he's got some years left. I just think that it's going to end up being more of a couple years here, year here, kind of moving around.
Yeah, and I mean Tyreek Hill did hit that 30-year-old cliff, so it's certainly fair to wonder that beyond just the attitude issues, if it's not a bad idea to get out from under all that. I was trying to look up Jalen Waddle for you. Jalen Waddle's 26, so you're right. 4 years, 4-year spread. Who is your next guy?
So my next guy is another old wide receiver, Cooper Kupp, and he's old. He's older than I thought, actually, by a couple years. He does have 2 years left on his deal, $30 million in dead cap, so they're not going to cut him. But he's been banged up. He's been usurped by Puka Nacua. He'll be 32 in June. He hasn't played a full season since 2021. And it's like, what are we going to do with him? We've seen them being the Rams, be able to fill in when Kupp and or Nacua are out with Demarcus Robinson and Tutu Atwell and Jordan Whittington. And they rely on the running game with Kyron Williams. They brought in Blake Corum to beef up the back end of the running game. So they've got weapons. Why not move on from Cooper Kupp? I get it. He's a team guy. He's, him and Stafford having breakfast and all of that stuff. But it just doesn't feel like there's enough room for him at 32 years old. Washington could use a second guy. Like, this was before De'Ami Brown started breaking out the last couple of weeks. But Cooper Kupp and Terry McLaurin would complement each other very well because you got Kupp in that short area and McLaurin with that 4.3 speed. And that really would provide some nice weapons for Jaden Daniels. New England was another spot. They need somebody. We saw England bring in, at least under the Belichick regime, bring in veteran receivers towards the end of their career and get 2 or 3 years out of them. And this would seem to be an opportunity to do that with Kupp.
Yeah, my last guy is an older receiver too, and that is Tyler Lockett, another player who, he's also 32. He's going into the last year of his deal. As we mentioned, a lot of being in flux in Seattle. They let go of their offensive coordinator. They have everyone of consequence that's a skill position player for the Seattle Seahawks, except for Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Zach Charbonnet is going into a contract year in 2025. There's been a lot of talk that maybe they want to move DK Metcalf. But I actually think Lockett would be the one that would probably be easier to move. He's been incredibly durable. He has only missed 2 games in his NFL career, only played 15 out of 16 games in 2016, only played 16 out of 17 games in 2022. He has more than 660 receptions. He has more than 60 touchdowns. He has more than 8,500 career yards. He is a perfect complementary receiver, like a number 2 guy. And there are a lot of teams that have a good number 1, but need more weapons, need guys that can fit in and can make plays. And in his own team, with the rise of Jackson Smith and Jigba and with DK Metcalf being something completely different kind of as a receiver, he became a little superfluous. And that's why this season, he only saw 74 targets after having 5 straight years with 100+ targets. Still caught 49 for 600, a couple of touchdowns. Was still a good player when given opportunities. But I just think that there is a good chance for him to go somewhere where a team needs a weapon. Like think about Dallas, where they have not been able to solve a wide receiver two question for a long time. They have a great alpha in CeeDee Lamb. They have potential tight end. They're probably going to need to focus on either in free agency or in the draft getting a running back. But if they could have a solid, that was the theory of why they went to go get Brandon Cooks, who's now a free agent. That never really hit the way I expected it could. I can see him going into a situation like that and being a great compliment.
Yeah, and I think one of the great things about Lockett too is that he's very versatile. Well, he's not a big guy. He can play on the outside, and he's played on the outside a lot in his career. He's got good speed. He's a really good route runner, so he can work the short area. So a team with a wide receiver two need, I agree with you, would really benefit from bringing in Tyler Lockett. So my last guy is, he feels like he's been star-crossed a little bit and then force-fed. Evan Ingram started out in New York. And just never seemed to be able to put it together health-wise. Always looked good when he played, was just a really good pass catcher. Just would get dinged up and miss time. He went down to Jacksonville, and he's put up some nice numbers there. He just got injured again. He's had one season he played all 17 games, maybe two. He's going to be 31. He's got 1 year left on his deal, $19 million dead cap if they cut him. So that's not insurmountable to eat that if they decide they really want to get out. I don't know that, they're going to, but with bringing in a new GM and a new head coach, with regime change, sometimes you're just going to cut ties. So he may get cut as opposed to traded. I think they trade him. They've got Brenton Strange waiting in the wings. He filled in admirably. He's a good athlete. He's a good-sized tight end. He's not the athlete that Evan Ingram is, but he also is, 8 years younger than Evan Ingram right now. He can play both ways. He's a good pass catcher. He could be a building block for your offense without being a featured part of it like Ingram would have to be. Because he just wasn't quite as good a blocker. Teams that he might flourish on, the Chargers could use a tight end like Evan Ingram. Their wide receiver core is basically Ladd McConkey. We got Palmer, and Palmer, I think his contract's coming up, and Quentin Johnston, unless they do a hand implants, I don't know that he'll ever reach his potential.
Well, and that tight end in particular, only Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst.
Well, they got Stone Smart too. Everybody's deep dynasty stash.
And has he replaced Donald Parham in your heart?
Yeah, no. If he was 6'7" like Parham was, maybe. Indianapolis, they've had a cast of tight ends that they're extras in a movie. They don't have lines. Their names aren't going to be in the credits. They're just extras in a movie, is what their tight end situation has seemed like for about 5 or 6 years now. Ingram could go there, be a reliable receiver from the tight end position for Anthony Richardson. That might actually make things better for Josh Downs and Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce and A.D. Mitchell. To have somebody reliable in that area. Your team, Denver, I see every mock draft I see has Denver taken either Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland. Maybe you do. Maybe you trade for Evan Ingram, and now you've got a pass-catching tight end.
Yeah, and Ingram's more durable than I guess we realized. He played 15 out of 16 games as a rookie. Then had 2 real bad seasons, played a full 16 games in 2020, played 15 out of 16 in 2021, then played 17 in both of his first 2 seasons in Jacksonville. So he only has 3 real iffy seasons. Maybe I just remember him never being available, or he was a guy early in the Giants' career you would have said needed a hand transplant as well.
Yeah.
Well, that'll do it for us today. Hope you've had a lot of fun. Hope you have a great weekend. We will be back on Tuesday. We are going to be talking 5 players who we think could step up in 2025. I know, at least for me, that's some young guys I think could take a leap, and we will recap the conference championship games. We'll see if any of these coaching moves become solidified over the weekend. Dennis, if people have a long Friday and Saturday kind of staring at the ceiling and waiting for the games, what can they do?
Well, they can do what I do. I go to my favorite podcast platform. I type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. Go ahead and subscribe. Give us a like. Leave us a rating and a review. I don't know if you guys know this. We have a 4.9 rating on iTunes. So keep that work up. Show us some love.
Well, that'll do it for us today.
Jordan Schultz is reporting as of a couple of minutes ago that Robert Saleh just landed in Jacksonville.
Well, somebody's going to be the coach of Jacksonville.
Could it be though that he wasn't like a super good coach. He also got the shaft a little bit too.
Yeah,
both of those things.
I still think he might be better served to go be a defensive coordinator somewhere and then look for a good opening. Because the thing about it is, if you flame out in your second position, and I have to be honest, I don't think that Jacksonville job is particularly attractive. Like, I wouldn't be shocked to have a guy like Liam Cohen, who only has a couple of years as a coordinator, looking for that first chance to step up, taking a flyer there. I don't think that job is particularly attractive. And, if Robert Saleh goes there and they flame out, that's probably the end for him. Whereas if he went and had an awesome year as defensive coordinator again and had some time to be like a Dan Quinn and evaluate openings and pick an opening where you thought you could maximize your talents, that would be better. And if he thinks Jacksonville's that place, more power to him. He's probably the only one that does.
Well, Jordan Schultz also reported an hour ago that Liam Cohen was interviewing a second time. There was
he did. As Schefter reported that Liam Cohen interviewed a second time with Jacksonville too. We knew he was out there, but he obviously has a pretty good deal to return to the Buccaneers, so I don't think there's a lot of pressure for him. And I think Saleh has a lot of interest to be a defensive coordinator somewhere. We'll have to see.
Well, it'll be interesting. Maybe they're going to bring Saleh in as Cohen's defensive coordinator.
Maybe they're going to bring him in as GM. You never know.
No.
Well, that'll do it for us today. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the conference championship games and go Bills.